Thanks everyone for joining this workshop. If you have any questions during the workshop, please feel free to ask them in the chat button just below. The actual TMLS 2020 summit is going to be starting tomorrow at 9 o'clock. You all would have received an email from Hopin yesterday with the link to join the summit for tomorrow and day after. And that's it. I'm just going to hand over to Saeed as well as Stefan as well.
Thanks, Faraz. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Amazon SageMaker workshop. Today, we are talking about how to build, train, and deploy your model using Amazon SageMaker. My name is Saeed Aghabozorgi. I'm senior machine learning specialist, solution architect from AWS. With me is Stefan and Natu. Stefan, can you introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, sure. My name is Stefan Natu, also a senior machine learning specialist, solution architect focused on financial services, and I'm based out of New York.
Awesome. Okay, well, let me just turn off my video to make sure that the quality of the bandwidth is good. And let's continue. Okay, so today's agenda is very quickly talking about the Amazon SageMaker, how it works, a 25 minutes presentation. And then we jump into 2 labs that we go from like a very easy lab to a more kind of like a challenging lab. So the prerequisite for 2-day labs is to have an account and you spin up a notebook instance in SageMaker. Hopefully you have done that. You have received an email and you have spin up a notebook instance. If you have not, please check your email and make sure that you have an account in AWS and you have spun up one notebook instance in SageMaker. Okay, we see the machine learning stack have 3 layers in AWS. The bottom layer are the frameworks infrastructure that specifically has been built for people who are comfortable building and maintaining their own machine learning platform, right? And their own infrastructure. It has different frameworks such as TensorFlow, PyTorch, MXNet, libraries such as Cross, Gluon, Scikit-learn, and so on. And you have access to the GPUs, CPUs, specifically for researchers and data scientists who are very comfortable to work on that level. In the middle layer, we have machine learning services that has been built to make the life of data scientists much easier, right? And it's used for day-to-day developers and data scientists to build, train, and deploy machine learning models. You can build your model with a single click in SageMaker. In addition to the IDE that is provided, or we call it SageMaker Studio IDE, you can use the APIs to call the services in the middle layer. And on top layer, we have AI services. AI services allows the developer just to use the pre-trained or auto-trained models to add kind of like intelligence to your applications without machine learning expertise. We have different services here, such as Amazon recognition for object recognition, and so on. We have speech, like text to speech and speech to text. We have natural language processing services, for example, Amazon Comprehend and TextRack. We have Kendra, which is our enterprise search, chatbot, Amazon Lex. We have recommender system, we call it Amazon Personalize. We have forecast to just forecast the time series, fraud detection service. We have Amazon Code Guru, and also contact center, contact lens. So today's focus is on the middle layer, and we talk about Amazon SageMaker as heart of the middle layer. So let's quickly talk about what are different steps of machine learning and why we think that the previous machine learning stage was very complicated. So traditional machine learning development was complex, expensive, and iterative process. Here was usually what happens. First, developers had to prepare data, then they had to select the algorithm or frameworks to build their model. And in the next step, they had to train the model on how to make the prediction, how to tune their model, how to deliver the best possible predictions. And finally, they had to integrate the models with their application and deploy it into the infrastructure or application that they wanted. But it was very complicated, right? Usually, they had to stitch together different tools and workflows, and specifically because there wasn't a kind of like an integrated solution for machine learning end to end, right? So if you are familiar with the machine learning workflow, for example, you know that notebooks are a great tools for individuals and developers to build the model, but it's hard to share those tools. Or for example, to tune a model, right? To run a kind of like a hyperparameter tuning, sometimes you had to run many days to just find the best combination of the hyperparameters for your models. And these are not easy. Like many of the tools that developers take for granted, such as debuggers, project managers, collaboration, and so on, are kind of like disconnected when it comes to the machine learning development. So SageMaker tried to solve this problem. SageMaker is a fully managed service that removes the heavy lifting from each step of the machine learning process. It has different features. We will, in the couple of slides, we will dive into each of those steps, right? And we talk more and more about some of these features that try to solve the problems that developers and data scientists have in each step. For example, you have access to fully managed processing job, labeling workflows, one-click collaborative notebooks. You have the built-in algorithms that you can use out of box, one-click training, and debugging and optimization, visually tracking of the experiment. You can deploy your model with one click. You can enable auto scale on the deployments, and also you can kind of like monitor your model for concept drift. So why SageMaker? As mentioned, Amazon SageMaker is a fully managed service that takes the complexity out of machine learning for developers, data scientists, and IT ops. It has came to make machine learning much easier. You have one-click train and train, for example. You have built-in algorithms and automatic training, right? You can easily scalable your performance. You have on-demand access to powerful GPUs, auto-scaling, and distributed training. It's cost effective. You know that, for example, cost mostly comes when you want to prepare your data, or when you want to label your data, or you want to deploy your model into the production, right? You can save your costs up to 70% when it comes to data labeling with the SageMaker, right? You have lower cost inference in the cloud and 10 times more developer productivity when it comes to Amazon SageMaker. It's very secure. Complete set of security features, including like network isolation, access control, encryption, and many different compliances comes with the SageMaker. That we will talk more about that one. And is really DevOps ready. It's a fully managed machine learning ops with the options to, for example, run it on Kubernetes and integrate with many orchestration third party as well. A quick call that Gartner has released its 2020 solution scoreboard for Amazon SageMaker. According to Gartner, SageMaker has an overall score of 84 out of 100, the highest rating among our peer groups. AWS was also the overall leader in Gartner's Cloud AI Developer Service Magic Quadrant from, I think, February, on both angles, from vision and ability to execute. Today, there are like 10,000 of customers that are using SageMaker, and we have thousands who kind of like have standardized their machine learning workflow on top of SageMaker. I'm not going to call many of those, but later I will touch one of those customers that are have really cool use case on SageMaker. So there are top SageMaker use cases, right? We have looked into the use cases that our customers are running on SageMaker and found that there are a few workloads that are kind of like common between many of our customers on different industries, such as predictive maintenance, demand forecast, fraud detection, credit or risk prediction, workloads such as computer visions, autonomous driving, personalized and chain predictions. And to make the life of our customer much easier, we have built a kind of solution for those. For the dump use cases, we provided a kind of like a pre-built, customizable solution that it can help you to accelerate your machine learning journey, right? It's kind of like, if you are familiar, is AWS cloud formation template. You go and click on that template, it will install and set up everything on one account, right? Then you can come back and change or expand each of those components. For example, it will comes with a sample data set for fraud detection, but later you can go and replace that data set with your own data set. Or for example, you expand the machine learning algorithms that it has, and so on. You can check this website, right? aws.amazon.com/SageMaker/getting started to get the list of all of those solutions that are already there, and you can look that one. So let's look at one of the customers that has a really cool use case. One of our customers is Lyft, and Lyft level 5 drives a fleet of cars to collect a massive amount of data using their camera sensors that they have. So a typical car daily can collect like 10 terabytes of data if they drive like 8 hours. And with hundreds of vehicles in the fleet, you can imagine that how much data they have to process the data. Data is ingested into Amazon S3, pre-processed and labeled, and if they wanted to kind of like run machine learning to do different things, such as object recognition, object detection, and so on. The solution for this problem was shown here. You can see that the data, the training data is collected from camera image, from videos that ingested from fleet of vehicles, and is pushed to the S3 via like a direct connect. The data is pre-processed, and then it sends for labeling through the SageMaker ground truth that I will later talk more about the SageMaker ground truth. It's loaded back to the S3 or DynamoDB, and then the data is sent to the SageMaker for training and validation to kind of like build a perception model. This perception model will do the object detection, semantic segmentation, and so on. And the model finally would be kind of like dumped into a S3 bucket. Okay, we'll look at different steps of the machine learning, right? Here we are going to zoom into each of those steps, like prepare, build, train and tune, and deploy and manage. And we kind of tell you that what kind of SageMaker features we have that can help you to build your model much easier and train your model and also deploy it into the production. So let's first start from the left side, SageMaker ground truth. So Amazon SageMaker, okay, before I talk about the ground truth, let me talk about the SageMaker Studio. SageMaker Studio is a visual integrated environment. It's one IDE, right, that has, you can run a machine learning workflow, like the complete machine learning from 0 to end. SageMaker Studio kind of like unifies all the tools that usually machine learning needs, machine learning developers need to develop a machine learning. So you can write your code, track, experiment, visualize your data, and perform debugging and monitoring all in one environment. From the day that we have started the SageMaker Studio in last year reInvent, almost the same days as today, we started adding more and more capabilities to SageMaker Studio. So through the SageMaker Studio, you can easily quickly move back and forth between the steps, and you can clone and tweak and kind of like reply all of the notebooks that you have. So here is what Amazon SageMaker Studio looks like. Today in the lab, we are not going to use Amazon SageMaker Studio. We are going to use kind of like a standard notebook instances, but I wanted to just kind of like show you that how the SageMaker Studio looks like. Later, you can go and spin up the SageMaker Studio and kind of like explore on your own that what's different between the SageMaker Studio and SageMaker. In SageMaker Studio, for example, on the left side, you can see that we are making updates to the models inside the notebook, but at the same time, we are seeing the change that impacts our model quality side by side on the right side of the interface. So one of the capability of the SageMaker Studio is autopilot. Also, it's available in the SageMaker notebook instances, but SageMaker autopilot is our autonomous capability of the SageMaker. So the concept is pretty simple. You bring your tabular data sets, right? And you select the target column for prediction. For example, you will bring a data set for customer churn, and you will say that, okay, this column is the column that I want to predict whether customer will churn or not. And SageMaker Autopilot automatically explore machine learning solution with different combination of data for preprocessors, algorithms, and also different parameters of that algorithms, and find the best model for you. It kind of like give you a scoreboard of all of the models. For example, here you can see that the SageMaker Studio has trained different models, right? And it also gives you the values for objective function. For example, is the value of the accuracy for F1. And you can easily go and find the best model, right click on that one and deploy the model into the production. I think tomorrow at 11 o'clock, I have one demo for SageMaker Studio. If you are interested, you can go to that demo. I will show you that how the SageMaker Studio, specifically Autopilot, works. And it would be a cool demo to learn more about SageMaker Studio if you are interested. Okay, security in Amazon SageMaker. As a managed AWS service, SageMaker also automatically inherit all the capabilities that we have in AWS global infrastructure and its network security features. For example, for infrastructure security and network isolation, you can easily control your traffic that comes to the SageMaker for ingress and egress traffic through different tools and options that we have. For example, you can easily run your workload in your virtual private cloud, your VPC, that will kind of like give you the full control and on the traffic that comes to your SageMaker notebook instances. There are many different options that you can enable on the SageMaker Studio to just make sure that it's secure. You can enable authentication and authorization that kind of like encrypt your data. You can encrypt your data at rest or in transit for data production. You can monitor and audible all of the API calls that comes to the SageMaker, and it supports different compiler certificates such as SAC2, SAC1, SAC2, and many other competencies that your organization might need for running a machine learning workload in SageMaker. Okay, let's come to the first step of SageMaker, preparation of the data. We have two features here in the preparation of data. One is Amazon SageMaker Grant Truth, which is used for labeling, and the second one is SageMaker processing. Let me quickly talk about the SageMaker Grant Truth. SageMaker Grant Truth is a feature of SageMaker that is built to kind of like to create the training data that you need to build the models. Usually this training data should be good enough in terms of size, at the same time should be labeled and annotated. SageMaker Grant Truth will help you to easily annotate your training data. You can use the SageMaker Grant Truth for images, for videos, and for text. For example, here you can see that kind of like a worker, a labeler can go to all the images that you provide and kind of like label all of your data. Here is a cool example. If, for example, you have a textual data, right? If you have a company, we see among many of our financial customers that they have a text data, they want to kind of like hire a label to go through their text and label the data. For example, go to here and say that, okay, what is the which term or which entity is organization, which entity is date, which entity is, for example, a product, and so on. So they kind of like define a job, send the job to some workers, and they go through each of those texts that they send and label that data for them. So who are these workers? The workers or labelers can be kind of like people from Amazon. We call it Amazon Mechanical Turk. It can be a third-party vendors that they can select from Amazon Marketplace, or it can be kind of like a private groups that they define. For example, if you are working in an organization that you have regulation, you can define a private labelers that they can go and label your data. The process is pretty simple. You define the job, you just drop your data, image, or text into the S3 bucket, and you give the instruction to the labelers that you define, and then go to the job and label your data and drop back the result into the S3 bucket. With that, I will pass it to Stefan to take over from here. Stefan, can you please take over from here?
Yeah, sure. Just do you want me to share mine? Yeah. Give
Go ahead.
me 1 second. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So basically, with SageMaker processing, right? As Saeed was mentioning, you can essentially use SageMaker processing to do your ETL jobs, right? So once you kind of label your data, which is ground truth, the next step is to basically run the ETL, right? And kind of one of the key kind of differentiators here with SageMaker processing is that now you don't need to go to EMR, you don't need to go to Glue. You can basically run that ETL job, whether it's a scikit-learn or even if it's just, Python scripts, right? Or whether it's a PySpark job, you can run all of that, directly within SageMaker using the processing capability. So then kind of on the training side, there's really two things to sort of think about, right? So the one is on the kind of training infrastructure perspective, what are the benefits that you get from having a managed platform? And then the other is, what benefits do you get from the science side, right? The actual kind of data science algorithmic perspective. What are some of the benefits that you would get from SageMaker? And then, Saeed also talked about a little bit about SageMaker Studio notebooks. So these notebooks are basically one of the kind of key benefits of these notebooks compared to, say, your Jupyter notebooks on your laptop would be that you can switch the underlying compute that the notebooks are living on. So the notebooks are basically like containers. And so SageMaker will kind of handle switching the containers and all the dependencies and everything, from one to the next. And so what that does is that if you were, say, training a deep learning model in the morning, and before you kick off a long, job that's going to run, say, overnight, you quickly just want to run a couple epochs and you want to test it out, right? So you can just quickly switch your instance type, change that to, say, a GPU or, maybe a more powerful instance, test everything's working okay, switch back to your low cost instance, right? And then kick off your training job separately. So SageMaker is a very modular platform, right? So your resources that you use for training or for processing, all of these are distinct resources from your notebook instance, right? And so that basically allows customers to use SageMaker in a, either in its entirety or in a very piecemeal way, right? So customers might just want to train and then deploy the model offline on-prem, or they might want to train on-prem and then use SageMaker purely for deployment. Whatever they want, they can do that because the platform, basically is kind of modular. So there's no requirement that your models need to be trained on SageMaker or they need to be deployed on SageMaker or any of that, right? So you kind of get that benefit by sort of offloading these different computational tasks. And then, of course, the other kind of really big, important reason to do that is data scientists are experimenting on the notebooks, but the notebooks are not, generally a notebook container is not really optimized as a training container because it has a lot of other IPython and Jupyter and all these other dependencies that you generally don't care about while you're training. Then on the science side, right, basically there's these 17 built-in algorithms that SageMaker offers, right, that sort of span the entire range of machine learning use cases, right, from recommendation system to traditional regression classification to kind of NLP, right, so whether it's topic modeling or text classification, then also kind of more advanced computer vision. So, he gave Saeed gave the lift level 5 example, right? So basically these algorithms for object detection and semantic segmentation, right? And then also some of these more unsupervised learning techniques, right? K-means, PCA, and others. And a number of these algorithms are actually, Amazon has done a bunch of internal research and published papers. And then, out of those papers, basically decided to provide these as available algorithms on SageMaker. So just kind of give you one example, if I take something like Blazing Text, it's really a fast text implementation, right? So fast text is Facebook's algorithm, but then Blazing Text is basically taking that and running that on a GPU. And then because you can now run fast text on GPU with Blazing Text, right, you can now expand your text corpus and really process through, billions of tokens as opposed to say millions of tokens, right? So that, of course, for these large scale NLP use cases can become pretty beneficial. You also have the machine learning marketplace. These are really third-party algorithms. So if you think that you have a really good model, you can actually put that on the marketplace, or you can basically go to the marketplace and say, do I have can I basically subscribe to a model or algorithm, right? So maybe somebody has already, maybe you're interested in a model for predicting, identifying traffic signs on the street, and somebody has already gone and trained that, right? So now you don't need to train this from scratch. Maybe you can just run some transfer learning on it directly. So you can subscribe to that algorithm, you can deploy that algorithm on SageMaker, and then you can really directly run it, or you can, use that algorithm to, do some additional training and things like that, right? So the way this works is the customer cannot really access the Docker container directly, right? But then there's documentation that the seller provides on the algorithms on, what modifications you can make and what you can't do and so on. But it also protects the seller's IP in this way, because it does not really, the customer does not have sort of direct access to the inner workings of these algorithms. And they generally run in a network isolated environment. So this is basically kind of where you would set up your network isolation such that your model container does not really even talk to you can set it up such that it doesn't even talk to your VPC and your private data. So it also protects you in that sense. So then, on the training, on the tuning side, right? So this kind of continuing the discussion on the infrastructure, right? So you can train with a single click or a single API call, on SageMaker. And then the training, actually, SageMaker has managed offerings for TensorFlow, for PyTorch. These are really SageMaker managed containers. So to give you an example, right, why would you want to use SageMaker managed TensorFlow as opposed to just saying pip install TensorFlow and let me just run stock TensorFlow? So one of the main benefits is that as you sort of start to distribute TensorFlow across, say, the P3 instance type, right, which is these GPU instance types that SageMaker or EC2 offers, basically, the scaling efficiency that you will get with SageMaker managed TensorFlow can be up to 90%. Whereas with stock TensorFlow, you get something like 65%, right? So what that means is that your model will basically, your distributed compute will scale a lot better if you're using the SageMaker managed TensorFlow. And then, of course, as you know, if it scales better, then that means you're training for less time, you're paying less, right? So time in this case is really money, right? So you're saving money by doing that. The other thing you can do is the training itself is not memory bound. So if you say, hey, my data set is kind of in the petabytes or, it's hundreds of gigabytes, and it's really expensive to put that on because now I have to pick a really expensive instance so that the instance has enough memory so that I can put all of my data, in the RAM, right? So you don't really need to do that. You can train using streaming data. That data can just be sitting in S3 and can just be piped into SageMaker as needed. And SageMaker will handle the prefetching and ensure that your GPUs are not starving and all of that. So it'll basically kind of handle all of the streaming training aspects for you. This way your training jobs are also not memory bound if you're really doing this very large scale training, right? So you imagine this like this lift level 5, right? They're obviously using this like streaming, right, to basically do their massive scale training. And that's really what most of at least my customers are doing, is they're working on extremely large data sets. Like anything it's like 100 gigabytes or more, you probably, as a rule of thumb, you want to stream that in. On the model tuning side, there is automatic model tuning. So, you don't need to worry about sort of writing your own, Bayesian optimization code or doing any of that. The model hyperparameter tuning will be handled for you. And so then this way, SageMaker will just spin up all the compute that's required, run a bunch of jobs in parallel. It'll run your hyperparameter tuning jobs. You can run about a few hundred jobs in parallel if you want, and then finish your hyperparameter tuning jobs. It'll tell you, what was the best model that you got, but it also, shows you all the other ones. But there's a single API that you can use to maybe access just the best one. So, and then you can all you need to specify is, for each of these sort of, depending on the algorithm you use, what kind of ranges you want to look for, and then it'll take care of the rest, right? So again, take care of a lot of that infrastructure side of things. So that's for a single training job. But what if you're working in a team and there's four of you and you all running different training jobs, right? So then it's very useful that hey, if I'm running XGBoost, maybe Saeed wants to run linear learner, right? So then we can actually compare and see which model is doing better, and we can visualize and we can track our experiments and improve our productivity as a team, this way, right? Or even if you're individually kind of training many different models, you want to be able to compare them. So SageMaker experiments allows you to basically organize your training jobs, also your processing jobs, things like that, and then visualize them, compare them, extract metrics, things like that. So it's always good to just see it in action. So this is a screenshot of what a SageMaker experiment looks like. So these are say 5 training jobs that were run, right? And then you can plot these custom charts, right? And then this way you can see that whichever job has the lowest loss, right? This is probably the job maybe that you should be looking at. This might have the best performance, or you can tell okay, at this point in all of these jobs or losses maybe saturating, I probably don't want to train for too long, too many periods beyond this, because maybe I'm overfitting or something like that, right? So having that visual feel is very, very important, right? So you can get interactive with your training job, and SageMaker experiments allows you to do that. There's also a capability called SageMaker Debugger, which, in the interest of time, we're not covering here, but that actually allows you visibility into the training job during the training, right? So SageMaker experiment is after the training, but then what about, during the training, I want to see how things are evolving. That's where SageMaker Debugger is very useful, captures the tensors from your training job, and then allows you to extract that information as well. Then one of the really key sort of value propositions of SageMaker is on the model deployment side. So really, this is sort of the, in some sense, a really big benefit, right? Because one thing that I've heard, in talking to sort of like hundreds of customers now, right, is that data scientists don't always, they have the skill set for kind of building and training the model and writing the algorithms and stuff, but the major complaint that I've heard is, okay, but my model lives on my laptop and I don't know how to take it forward from here, right? How do I actually build the CI/CD or the tooling that's needed to deploy this model as an endpoint so I can run a production workload on it that can actually have some sort of business value, right? And so what that really needs, right, is that you need infrastructure to set up things like auto scaling. You need infrastructure to understand, how do I get high throughput and low latency inference? How do I Dockerize my model into a container? How do I build a REST API or a some sort of reverse proxy and all of that on top of my on top of my container, on top of my serving container, right? So that I can actually make RESTful API calls to that in a secure manner. So there's a lot of things to sort of consider and think about, right? And then SageMaker deployment basically handles all of that for you. So you don't have to worry about doing any of that. You just say model.deploy, and then it is basically kind of taking care of a lot of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, right, for you, because at the end of the day, an infrastructure setup, that's a repeatable process, right? So the process that's not repeatable is your model container. That is your thing, but building that model container, or grabbing your code, building the container, and then putting a API on top of that, and basically setting up auto scaling on top of that, that's something that is undifferentiated. So that's what SageMaker can take care of, so you don't have to worry about that, right? And then once the model is deployed, right, the next big question comes, okay, now what about the monitoring of the model, right? Particularly if you have seasonal models, right? So I work a lot in New York, so my customers, a lot of financial services, so a lot of the models have quite a bit. It's a very time series focused industry, right? And a lot of the models do have seasonality. Similarly, if you're in the retail space, there's a lot of seasonality there too, right? Now we're coming to the holidays, so there's going to be all sorts of deals happening. The data that they get, the sales data, right, point of sale data, all of this has a lot of seasonal dependency, right? So your data is actually changing over time quite a bit. And so having a monitoring system that can actually monitor your data, look for things like data drift, right? So here you can see this feature is drifting as a function of time compared to the baseline, right? This value feature was trained on, but now the total value seems to be drifting, right? So is this, sorry, let me go back. Yeah, is this sufficient, enough drift that it is now going to affect poorly or adversely my model performance, cause my model performance to degrade? Model Monitor will notify you if that happens, and it will you can use that as a trigger then to say, when should I retrain? Because, most of my customers I'm talking to right now, they are just retraining. They're saying, yeah, I'll retrain weekly or retrain, monthly or whatever. There's not that much intelligence into that process yet. I think this is still fairly nascent field, to be honest. So how do you put that intelligence in there, right? How do you get the intuition on when should I be retraining and when should I be using that? So that's, Model Monitor is a step in that direction. And then finally, going back to that lift example, right? A lot of these, particularly in that space, right? It's really important to have the models ultimately become lightweight, so that even if you're training this massive model, ultimately when you're running inference, actually, like you might be training a model, you train everything in mixed precision, so that takes up a lot of memory, right? But really, there's a lot of tricks that you can do to reduce the size of the model that do not affect the accuracy in any way. And for inference, for example, sometimes you don't need mixed precision, right? Because you don't really care about vanishing gradients at inference time. You only care about it during training. So this is where SageMaker Neo can help. SageMaker Neo, what it does is like a compiler for your model. So it can basically take these models if they're built in these popular frameworks, and then you specify, I want to deploy this model on some sort of hardware. What kind of hardware do you want to use, right? Is it Intel or NVIDIA GPU or ARM, or if I want to use some kind of NVIDIA like Jetson, some sort of edge device, right, that I want to deploy my models on. And Neo will basically act as a compiler. So it'll basically, take your model and it'll run a bunch of quantization and other gradient pruning and things like that, a bunch of, the deep learning, model, the pruning of the actual architecture, deep learning architecture, et cetera. It'll run all these steps, right, on the model to reduce the model size so that it can fit on these devices, right? And by reducing the model size, but actually not affecting the model accuracy. So you get, a significantly smaller model footprint, which can improve your throughput, and your accuracy stays the same, right? And then also, now your memory requirements are much more reduced if you're going to go and try to deploy this on a Jetson or a Nano type device, right? So it's intended for edge deployment, but I think it's, actually much more useful, even sort of generally for production deployment. If you can reduce your model footprint, then why not, and you can just run a SageMaker Neo on that. So finally, on the inference side, there's a number of compute instances that you can use to basically for your training versus your inference. Generally, for your small models, if you have lower throughput, the C instances are going to be pretty good. If you're running large-scale inference that requires GPU, then consider using the G4 for the inference. The P3 probably is better suited for training workloads. There's also this Inferentia chip. The Inferentia, this is really a custom chip designed by AWS. And because it's designed by AWS, it's the lowest cost chip that we have in the cloud right now for inference workload. And you can get up to 2x. So for a YOLO model, recently there was a study that showed that you can get up to 2x the improvement, the performance boost by going the Inferentia route, as opposed to even deploying on the G4. So, performance boost again means that you're saving cost, right? Because you can perform inference much faster. So again, definitely look into this. It's a relatively new technology, came out last year. And then also you have the option, if you have a model, but you don't need an entire GPU for inference, you can just apply a fraction of a GPU. And that's what this elastic inference is all about. So you basically have a network attached GPU that's attached to your CPU instance, but you're only using a fraction of the GPU. And so this way you can get a lot of benefit because you're using fraction of it. So you only pay, if I'm using 1/10 of it, I only pay for 1/10 of it. So you can save a lot, because the big sort of issue that a lot of customers have on-prem, right, is that they buy a lot of this GPU and they rack and stack the hardware, everything in the data center. But it turns out the GPUs are not being used, right? And I saw this in my previous employer as well. Like nobody was using the GPUs outside of the training workload. And then for the inference workload, the GPU was just sitting there doing nothing, or using very little of it was being used for inference, right? Most of it is used primarily for training, but training is relatively infrequent, right, compared to inference, which is much more consistent. And so GPU, so if you want to just use a fraction of it, this elastic inference is really good technology for doing that. And then sort of the very last step, right, is once I actually deploy my model, I need sometimes I often need a human to come in and review that and have some kind of human review workflow, right? Whether it's a approval workflow, right? Whether a human comes in and says, yes, deploy this model. So that could be an approval workflow, but also you could have this other workflow, right? Where you have some kind of model, right, that makes a prediction, and then the high confidence predictions are good. These can go to your application. Low confidence predictions, maybe you want to send it to human review, right? And the human will review it, and the results will be sitting in S3, and then those can go to your client application in an asynchronous manner. But then also these results stored in S3 can now be used to go back and retrain this model here. So with A2I, you can kind of build that human review workflow. It gives you that UI and UX that you can use to build human in the loop systems for your machine learning workloads at the very end of them, right? Once you kind of have trained and deployed your model. So I know we're all excited to get hands-on, so I don't want to spend too much time talking your ears off. There's a number of resources to get started. We have documentation. We have this awesome SageMaker examples GitHub repo. This has hundreds and hundreds of notebooks that cover a number of use cases that are very, very useful. There's the SageMaker Python SDK. This is where you can sort of learn about all the APIs. And then this is the documentation that kind of walks you through what SageMaker is all about, and any of those features that we discussed. Additionally, we have a number of these tutorials. So even after this, there's like a number of these short 10-minute tutorials that can walk you through things like, hey, I would just want to see everything that we did today. What if you want to do that on SageMaker Studio? We have tutorials that will help you do that, and other workshops and things like that as well. So with that, these are basically the prerequisites for today's lab. And so earlier, I hope that if you already have your AWS accounts ready, you have an S3 bucket that you can use. You have a SageMaker spin up. You want to spin up a SageMaker notebook instance. And once your notebook spins up, you want to click on Open Jupyter. And then the workshops, I'll leave this slide up. Basically, what we're going to be running is found on this GitHub here. So it's the AWS samples, it's the SageMaker Immersion Days Git repo. So whenever your SageMaker SageMaker notebook instance spins up, you want to open up a terminal, and in that terminal, type in cd SageMaker and then clone this repo here, and then that will get us started. But also, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take questions as well.
Could you copy paste that link into the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Bear with me here. Yep, I just pasted that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the slides will be available after. Yeah, I think we can make those available, right? I just have to confirm with the organizers, but there's no issue from our side. So maybe when people are able to get to the notebook instance and able to, access SageMaker, and then just clone this repo, if you want to, just either raise your hand or just say something in the chat, that would be great. Or if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute or type them in as well. And so this way we can help you. But then that will tell us, this way we can also switch to that notebook environment and start, show you that. So, Saeed, are you able to monitor the chat? This way I can leave this up.
Yes, I'm monitoring the chat and try to answer the question as much as possible.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let me open the chat on the side. See if I can... Okay, great. Looks like we have a few people already. So those of you who are ready, as you're getting started, yeah, maybe Saeed, if you want to just introduce, kind of what the lab are going to be, and what the steps people need to take. So those who are ready can, potentially get started.
Okay, so let me send you a workshop address to this chat room. Okay, I've sent one address to the chat room, right? SageMaker dash immersion day dot workshop dot aws slash lab one. This website kind of explains what you are going to do in the lab part. Just one note is that this workshop is based on the SageMaker Studio, but we are using the SageMaker. So I will suggest you to start from the data preparation part of lab one, right? Let me share my screen quickly and go through that one first.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, can I take over? Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
That's fun. Okay, awesome. Let me make sure that it's right. Okay, 1 second. Sorry. Okay, awesome. So if you go to this address, SageMaker dash immersion day workshop .aws, right? You will see a kind of like a workshop that has 4 labs. For today, we are going to go to lab 1, lab 2, and optionally lab 3 if you have time, right? So if you click on lab 1, right, it just explains that what is lab 1 about and how to launch Amazon SageMaker Studio. But we are not going to use Amazon SageMaker Studio today, right? We are going to use Amazon SageMaker, like a standard notebook instances that you have already spin up, right? So you can start from here, data preparation, right? The Git clone address that Stefan has sent to you is here, right? You can just git clone it into your notebook instances, right? And as soon as you git clone that notebook instances, you will see a kind of like environment like this on the left side of the notebook instance, right? And then you can directly go to the XGBoost direct marketing, right? And click on XGBoost direct marketing, which is lab 1 and lab 2. And you can start running the notebooks from here. Is it clear? Do you want me to explain again from scratch?
That makes sense.
Okay, if you have any question, come off of mute and please let us know. We can explain it step by step. So as soon as you git clone into your notebook instance, right, you should be able to open XGBoost Direct Marketing SageMaker and you can start running this notebook. It's very self-descriptive. Let me quickly open the chat room as well and see that if is there any question there.
Is there a specific kernel we should set? Oh yeah, I see that question in the chat as well.
Yes, you should select Conda Python 3. If it comes, please select Conda Python 3.
Got it. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, let me, uh, okay, some people don't see the left panel when they git clone. First of all, make sure that you have opened the Jupyter lab, right? It means that when you go to the, let me start from here, right? When you go to the Amazon SageMaker notebook instances, right? Make sure that you go to the Open Jupyter Lab on the right side, right? So when you click on Open Jupyter Lab, by default, you should see the panel on the left side. So simply, you have to go to File, New, Terminal, and let me do it again. You have to run cd SageMaker. Make sure that you have run cd SageMaker, right, before git clone, right? Then git clone, right? The address that Stefan has sent to you. Let me copy that address as well, right? I already have that folder, but for you, it should work, right? And after that, you can click on this refresh button, the small refresh button here, and you should see the folder on the panel. Okay, if you have opened the Jupyter, it's good. You should be able to see that folders in the Jupyter. So let me open the Jupyter as well in this case. So if you have opened Jupyter instead of Jupyter Lab, right, it works. As soon as you click on the Jupyter, right, you can simply, you should be able, if you have already cloned that one, you should be able to see that, right? If you have gone to the SageMaker. If you have not gone to the SageMaker folder, you cannot see that.
Saeed, do you want to go to the data pull step? There's a question in the chat on that. Someone's seeing that it's failed with initial frozen solve error.
Data pool.
Yeah, I don't know if it would help if I share my screen. I don't know if anyone else is also running into this issue.
I'm not sure that you would be able to share your screen, and I'm not sure that how we can pass the host screenshot. So where is the error? Which cell?
The wget one.
Okay.
Okay, wget one.
If you
I think
just
that's way at the top, right?
scroll up. Yeah, this is the one under data, the first cell under data. Not that one.
Here.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, let me try it again to make sure that. Let me just quickly run that cell separately to see that it works. Okay, let me make my screen a bit bigger. It's working for me. So you see an error here when you run this line of code?
Yeah.
Or for the Conda install Conda force.
Oh, okay. Ethan is saying it just solved itself, so I'm just gonna wait it out. I ran the entire cell all together, so I'm not sure which of those 3 commands is causing the issue, but it's saying something like the environment is inconsistent. Please check the package plan carefully. But the command hasn't failed yet, so I'm hoping it will just fix itself.
Oh yeah, if it's an environment, then it might be in the Conda. Yeah. Oh, this one here failed with frozen
Right,
solve. Looks like
yeah.
you had the same one, Saeed.
Yeah, it's fine. You can pass that one. It's a kind of like an environment issue with the Conda, but you can easily pass that one and go to the next step. As soon as it's finished, the next step would be okay, and you would be able to run it.
Got it.
Right. As you can see, same as me. Like I just saw that error, but the next cell was run successfully, and I continued, and it works well.
Okay, the command seems to still be running, but I'll just wait it out.
Yep. So this kind of line is just to install the unzip package that we need to unzip the data that we have downloaded, right? Because the data that you are downloading is zip. So to unzip that one, we are just installing that package in the notebook instance, and we use it to unzip our data set. But you should be able to unzip it.
Yeah, you're right. The command just finished running.
Yep. So fail with initial frozen solve is not actually the failure, it's just a warning. You can just continue and go to the next line.
Someone's site seems to be having an issue with the actual AWS account. That's typically it is immediate, right? You should be able to log in.
Yes, I created my AWS account, but I'm not able to access any service. Is there a place to go to create a free account? I'm logged in. So as soon as you create an AWS account, you should be able to see all of the services.
Yeah, it looks like maybe you can't access the AWS. Are you able to log in or? What does it say when you log in? If you don't mind coming off mute, maybe you can.
Okay, it looks like that it says that unable to verify my payment yet.
Yes, that's what it's saying.
Good.
It's saying
Go ahead.
you're able to verify your default payment method.
I personally never seen such an error. Have you seen, Stefan, such an error?
I have not. So I'm trying to see what I can do from my, I mean, whether I can just create an event engine. So
Can I quickly share my screen or no? I can't.
Unfortunately, we won't be able to like kind of like we are not the host, right? I'm not sure that we would be able to pass the shared screen is not available for the attendees. I mean, it's just enabled for Stefan and me. I don't think that you would be able to share.
Actually, I do see a share screen option.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I don't know if it will work, but maybe Saeed, if you want to like stop screen
Yeah,
sharing,
I
can
will
see
stop sharing. Yeah, go ahead if you can share.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, in fact, I see.
Okay, great. So I guess the person who is having an issue can try.
Go ahead if you want to share the screen.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
This is what I'm saying.
Okay. Just let's see that Stefan, can you give you another icon that you can easily try it out with that account? I'm not sure that what's the issue with the bank or how they communicate the AWS with your credit card stuff. So we can stop sharing and let's see that Stefan can pass to your one icon to try it out.
Yep.
Also, are you sure if your expiry date on your credit card is correct? Because it looks like it's expiring now.
Oh, right.
You probably don't need to share while you're doing this.
Exactly. Yeah. Please don't share it. Don't stop at the end of lab one. Please continue with lab two if you have finished lab one.
Anyone else having account issues? Yeah. So whenever, if this payment thing doesn't work, just let me know. I can give you an account, and then we can just use that for this lab so that you can continue working. Just message in the chat.
Just a reminder that we can't see anyone's screen right now, other than I think some sort of splash screen.
Okay, when you are running the lab two, if you have reached to the lab two, right, there's one cell that you are running for training, right? You will call the SageMaker training cluster to run your training path, right? The place that you called xgboost.feed, right? When you call this uh, cell, it will start the cluster behind the scene, right? And SageMaker will train your model. So if you want to understand what's happening, you can, I suggest you simply go to the SageMaker console, right? And on the left side, you can click on the training part, right? And training job. So you will see your training job here that is running. You can simply click on your training job and see all the information about that training job, right? So all the features that uh, uh, Stefan and I have talked about for the SageMaker, you can see on the left side of the SageMaker console, right? If you go to the SageMaker and you can see all of those information here. And step by step, when you, for example, do the processing, you can see that processing job. When you run the training job, you can see all the information about the training job, such as, for example, where is your input data, what are the metrics, what are the accuracy, and monitor everything here. And when you deploy your model, also, you can see your endpoints here on the left side. So I recommend you that kind of like explore on the left side as well when you are waiting for a training job.
So lab one, as you know, is focused mainly on the data exploration side. Lab two is going to be about training and model deployment. And then in lab three, you'll see some of the newer features as well for model monitor and some of those features that we talked about. So another kind of key point is that, we talked about some of these features like model monitor, SageMaker processing, all of these things in the context of SageMaker Studio. And a common question I get from customers is, I don't have SageMaker Studio. Does that mean I can't use any of them? So the answer is yes, you can. Everything from autopilot, SageMaker experiments, model monitor, debugger, processing, everything is available within SageMaker Notebook instances as well. You just have to call the API, and then you can get all of those as well. So basically, it's just a question of Studio is, just think of that Studio as the IDE. It provides much more of a visual single pane of glass UI UX experience. But you can call, ultimately, these are all API calls that you're making in the backend. So you can make those from your notebook instance, can make them from anywhere. I will just share an account with you right now. Just
Okay, there's a question that what is the input data? Do you mean the input data for training jobs? Can you come off of the mute? I want to make sure that I've understood your question.
I'm not the person who asked the question, but I do have the same question. What is this data? What are the numbers we're looking at? What kind of information does it convey?
Okay, so the thing is that we read the data that you are looking at, right? If you have run this cell specifically, right, you can see that the data has different columns, right? For example, the data is about the marketing data, right? And it has, for example, information about the whether the for example a record is a person in that record in that data set is a student or not, what kind of service they are using, self-employed or not, and so on, right? So it's a database that you can easily even like look into that data. I'm not sure that we have looked into the data set or not, but let me quickly maybe I can run a command to show you that how the data looks like, right? So you can easily look at the data here. If you have run that columns, you can simply just you can look at the first 5 row of that data. Okay, let me make sure that I've run the cells. Unfortunately, I haven't run the cells. from a kernel has died. Let me quickly run these cells and show you that how the data looks like. Okay, I have to start from scratch, sorry. Give me 1 second to run this. Okay, here you are. So you can see that our data set has around like a 41,000 rows, right? The data is about different people, right, or different persons, right? And we are going to do the kind of like a marketing, right? And what we are doing is that to predict whether a customer that we have will, for example, reply to a campaign or not, right? We are predicting the last column, Y column, no or yes, right? Doesn't matter. It's like a marketing data. It can be, for example, predicting of whether someone has cancer or not, or whatever that we are kind of like classifying. It's a classification problem, right? And we are predicting whether a row or would be yes or no, right? There are different columns here, right? For example, what is the job of that person? What is the age of person? What is the, for example, marital status, education, and so on, right? So in the lab one, we are kind of like cleaning this data. We do all the pre-processing, we do the transformation and so on, right? And we kind of like do the exploration of the data. As soon as the lab one is done, right, which is kind of like a data exploration and cleaning the data and so on, right? We kind of like dump the data into the S3 bucket. So it would be the data that is ready for training the model. So in lab 2, right, that start from here, you will read back the data again from S3, right, and you train the model, correct? So at the end of the lab 2, when you have trained the model, you will use that model to host it in SageMaker, right, through this line of code, just one line to deploy, right? And then you evaluate your model in terms of the accuracy. Correct, that what is the accuracy of model in terms of predicting whether a customer would be reply to a campaign or not, right? And finally, you can use the predict command to predict that, for example, if we have a new customer or we have an existing customer and we want to test whether they will answer to a campaign or not, they will reply yes or no, right? And that's it. We will stop from automatic model tuning. We don't suggest, like this one is optional, but we don't suggest to run that one, and we suggest to skip to the lab 3 if you have time. How I answered your question, is it clear now?
Saeed, this is Jan. I asked the original question in the chat. I did not have the data because I was still running the unzip, and I was looking at the GitHub data, the data that's provided in the data folder on GitHub, and it looks like this data is different than the one that we are downloading in the Jupyter. So I think you answered my question.
Awesome, thanks. So the data that comes to the notebook specifically is from this link, right? I think the link of the data is here, right? Is SageMaker that sample data.wes, right? It should be same as the Git. I'm not sure, maybe the Git version of the data is a bit more cleaner than that one, but you can easily look at the data from this link, right? HTTP SageMaker, here is a link. If you want to look at the data, even you can copy this one and put it into the browser, and you should be able to download that data easily on your computer and unzip it on your computer and look at that data, right? I hope I answered your question. Please let me know if you have any more questions. You're welcome.
Could you talk a little bit about the correlation matrix? This is in lab 1, where they plot the correlation matrix.
Yes.
Yeah, this one. So age, if I look at the very first square, I'm not sure I understand. So I understand age is correlated with age as 1, which is what the table above says, but I don't understand what the plot is supposed to represent.
The
Actually,
correlation, yeah. So the way the pandas correlation plot works is that, yeah, exactly. So what it does is that if a feature is, if it's like a correlation between a feature and itself, it actually just shows the distribution, and then
Oh,
for any other off diagonals, it actually shows you the correlation.
okay, that makes more
That's
sense.
just like a pandas thing. Yeah.
yeah. So all the cells in the diagnosis are just distribution of the data. I think
Yeah, just the
histogram of
data
data.
histogram.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Good question. Yeah, it's not obvious, right? Looking at it.
Yeah. Okay, again, please don't run the, I recommend that you don't run the after you host your data, don't run the hyperparameter tuning, because the hyperparameter tuning behind the scene runs many jobs and might take some times to run it, right? You can run it later on your own, right? But if you have finished by evaluation of your model, you can skip this part and go to the next lab, considering that we have only 6 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
Another thing to show here, Saeed, if you want to just scroll up just briefly a little bit onto your training, at the very end. So you're seeing everyone, you see the training logs here, right? So this is basically the model, showing you the training. One thing you might have noticed, right, is that the training takes some time, because SageMaker is, what it's doing, right, is in the back end, it's basically spinning up a instance for you, attaching a storage volume to that instance, copying your data over, running the training job, and then sending you the outputs in S3. But what you might wonder is like, oh, I can just run this in my notebook and it takes 5 seconds. And why did it take SageMaker so long to do all this? And again, the way you want to think about it is that, for your notebooks, yeah, these data sets that we use, unfortunately, in these workshops are quite small. Like, we don't really have the very few sort of public large data sets that are out there. And generally, it's not worth it for running a workshop. But if you're running a really large data set, then you want to offload that task to SageMaker so that it can go off and run the training job on the side. And then, it can, and then basically you can go off and do other things while, essentially a training job is running for you, right? So the other thing you'll see is that the amount of time actually, even though the training job took a few minutes to set up and shut down, all of this is fully managed for you. So that instance turns on, it copies the training job, runs a training job, and then it automatically shuts down that instance. You're only paying for, the amount of time it actually took for the training. So in this case, it's 103 seconds, right? So about, a little less than 2 minutes. You're basically just paying for that time. You're not paying for any of the setup time, any of the teardown time, any of that, right? So you see the training seconds and the billable seconds. And Saeed briefly mentioned, Lyft is using the spot instance, right, for training. So what that means is that you can basically get a cost reduction by going to spot training by, essentially SageMaker will go see if there's a spot instance available, and then you'll pay the spot price instead of the training price. So if you're using spot instance, it'll be reflected in your billable seconds. Your billable seconds will be much smaller than the training seconds. And that's how you'll know that, I'm only paying for 50% of it or whatever. That depends on the spot price, that varies, but you can get more cost savings that way. Yeah, I see a question here on the hyperparameter. Yes, the hyperparameter tuning means, yes, that is running in the background. You can just let that, if you want to just let that run, that's totally fine. And you can actually go to the next lab, right? It's, as far as I know, it's not a dependency.
If you want to kill that, also you can always come to the SageMaker console, you come to the training job, and simply just you stop the training job or stop the hyperparameter tuning job if you don't want to run that run at all, right?
Does the delete endpoint shut down the instance for you?
Doesn't shut down the notebook instance. It shuts down the endpoint that particular model is hosted on. So
Okay, thanks.
Notebook instance is something that you have to shut down yourself. I would recommend, after this workshop, at least at the very least, stop your notebook instance if you don't plan on working on it. If you stop it, then you won't pay for it. If you terminate it, then of course you'll lose, any kind of data or anything that was on that notebook instance. But at least, at the very least, if you want to stop it, then you'll stop paying for it, and then you can come back to it later or whatever. It'll still retain your notebooks and things like that. So that's another way to save costs. Generally, what we see happening in the enterprise is, basically you can use like a lifecycle configuration, to basically automate that. So let's say if my data science team is based out of Toronto, then, maybe starting at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., all of the notebook instances will spin up, right? And at 7 p.m., they'll all shut down, kind of thing. It's just do it in an automated way.
Please notice that when you finish your notebook, come to the last cell of your notebook, right? There is a kind of like cleanup. Make sure that you run this cell, right? It will kill your endpoint if you have created the endpoint, because you don't want to pay for that endpoint, right? Just be careful about that one. Also, I suggest you come back to Amazon SageMaker, check that your endpoint has been killed for sure, right? You can click here and simply just click on action, right? And delete that endpoint. It will be delete that endpoint, right? If you have started a kind of like a hyperparameter tuning or training job that is still in progress and you don't want to complete that one, you can come here and just click on action and stop it or delete it, right? One more thing, we have, I think, only 1 minute left for these workshops. Please help us to fill up this survey. I will send it to our chat room, right? There's a link, right? It would be the feedback survey. I really appreciate it if you can like fill up that survey that help us to understand how we have done for this workshop and be better for our next workshop that comes next year. Okay, it's 10:30. All the workshop materials that we have shared with you would be available for you, right? You can keep continuing for yourself. Hopefully you have enjoyed what we have shared with you. Please let us know if you have any question. Our email address and information are available in the TMLS website. You can connect to us and we will be happy to answer any question that you have. Thanks a lot for joining. Stefan?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really pleasure. Definitely appreciate it. If you could fill up the survey, just let us know how we did. Really appreciate that as well. And thank you all for your time.
Okay, with that, thanks a lot. We are going to close the room.
Oh, contact information, Saeed, in the chat.
Sure, I can put my contact information in the chat. You can easily find me in the LinkedIn. Also, my email is.
Yep, you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
And my name is, you can simply find me in the LinkedIn as well.
The notebook instance should be there. I'd be surprised if the notebook instance disappeared. Yeah, even if you run the last cell, the thing that will disappear is the SageMaker endpoint, which is the hosted endpoint, but not the notebook instance. The notebook instance should still be there. So if you're running into that issue,
make sure that you have not, for example, come here and make sure that you haven't checked any of those. Sometimes it doesn't show the notebooks that are stopped, right? If you run something, if you have written something here, right, it might not show some of the notebooks. You can refresh that one. It shouldn't stop your notebook instances if you have not deleted the notebook instance for sure. Okay, with that, thanks everyone. Have a very good rest of the day. Goodbye.